The wind screamed like 1,000 angry spirits, tearing across the frozen wasteland. Snow whipped against the small group of humans as they fought to keep moving. Each step felt heavier than the last, their boots sinking into the endless white desert of ice. Captain Mark tightened his scarf over his face, his breath freezing instantly in the deadly air. The storm was worsening and visibility was dropping to nothing. They were far from their ship, cut off after a sudden avalanche, buried. "The path back, keep moving," Mark shouted over the storm. His voice was strong, but even he knew their chances were fading fast. The cold could kill faster than any enemy. The team stumbled forward, searching for anything. A cave, a hollow, even a crack in the ice where they could shelter. Their bodies were shaking, lips blue, hearts slowing. Then Private Allen's boot struck something hard, not ice, not rock. It gave a strange sound, a hollow thump. He fell to his knees, brushing away the snow with frozen hands. "Captain," Allen called. His eyes were wide with something between fear and surprise. The others gathered, brushing and digging with numb fingers. At first it looked like just a frozen lump, buried deep under layers of snow and ice. But soon, the outline grew clear. Smooth skin, long limbs, a body, a girl. The team froze, staring at her. She was not human. Her skin was faintly silver, glowing slightly even through the ice. Her hair was tangled strands of white that blended with the snow around. She looked fragile, like a sleeping statue. "Is she alive?" whispered Corporal Davis, his teeth chattering. Mark pressed a hand against her neck. For a terrifying moment, nothing. Then, faint, so faint, he felt a weak pulse, a flutter of life. "She's breathing," Mark said, shock in his voice. The humans exchanged looks. None of them had expected this. On a death world of ice, they had discovered a living alien girl. "What do we do with her?" Davis asked. "We can barely save ourselves." Silence fell. The storm roared louder, reminding them that they had minutes, maybe less, before they froze to death. Mark made the decision. "We take her." No one argued, not because it was easy, but because something in the sight of her, the fragile chest rising and falling, the faint glow of life, forced their human hearts to act. They dug her free with desperate hands. The ice cracked and broke, and soon the girl's body was pulled. From her frozen tomb she was light, frighteningly light, as if she had not eaten in weeks. Her skin was ice cold, almost painful to touch. Her lips were pale, her breathing was weak. "She won't survive out here," Allen muttered, fear in his voice. Neither would they. Mark scanned the land. His sharp eyes caught a shadow in the storm, a dark ridge, maybe a broken hill of ice. They dragged themselves forward, carrying the alien girl between them. Every step was agony. Their muscles screamed, but giving up was not an option now. Finally, they reached the ridge. At its base was a shallow hollow, barely enough for shelter, but it was all they had. The team huddled inside, shielding the girl from the wind. "She's freezing," Davis said. His hands trembled as he touched her cheek. "She'll die in minutes." "Our heaters are broken," Allen groaned. "We've got nothing left." Mark's jaw tightened. He looked at his team, then at the alien girl lying helpless in the snow. Her body glowed faintly with every breath, like a dying ember. "There's one thing we can do," Mark said slowly. "It's risky, but it might save her." The others understood. Humans had one thing the storm could not steal from them: body heat. "Are you saying we use ourselves?" Davis asked, his voice full of disbelief. "Yes," Mark replied. "If we give her our warmth, she may live. And if we lose too much heat, we die," Allen muttered. Mark's eyes burned with determination. "Better, we try and fail, then sit here and watch her freeze." The silence stretched. Then one by one the humans nodded. They pulled her closer, wrapping blankets around all of them, pressing her between their shivering bodies. Their warmth bled into her, and for a moment it felt hopeless. The storm was too strong, their heat too weak, but then something strange happened. The alien girl's skin shimmered faintly under their touch, not just silver but glowing blue like fire under ice. Her shallow breaths grew stronger, her chest rising a little higher. Allen gasped. It's working. The girl's eyelids fluttered. Her lips trembled as though she wanted to speak, but no words came. The humans held tighter, ignoring their own freezing pain. They did not know who she was or why she was buried under the snow. They only knew this: if they let go now, she would die. The storm raged on outside, but in that small, hollow, a fragile flame of life refused to be extinguished. Mark whispered softly, "Hold on, little one. You're not alone anymore." And in that moment, as the snow buried the world in silence, humanity's warmth became her only hope. The hollow in the ridge shook under the weight of the storm. Snow hissed and howled outside. The humans pressed closer, their arms wrapped around the alien girl, trying to give her as much heat as their freezing bodies could spare. Captain Mark felt her skin against his arm. It was strange, not like human skin. It was smooth, almost glass-like, with a faint glow that pulsed under his touch. Her breath was shallow, but at least it was steady now. Private Allen's teeth were chattering. "Captain," he muttered, "if we keep this up, we'll be as frozen as she is." Mark didn't answer. He was watching the girl's face. Her eyelids twitched, her lips parted, letting out a sound, a soft, broken noise that wasn't human, but alive. "She's fighting," Mark whispered, his own lips numb. "Don't stop. She's fighting." The others obeyed, though their bodies screamed in pain. Their hearts pounded slowly, too slowly. They all knew the risk. Humans weren't meant to share heat like this for hours in a blizzard. They were burning their lives away to give hers a chance. But something unexpected happened. The glow in her skin grew brighter as they stayed near her. Their warmth wasn't just saving her, it was changing her. The faint blue shimmer spread across her arms and chest like fire waking from ashes. Corporal Davis pulled his hand back, startled. "She's glowing more, is that normal?" "Nothing about this is normal," Mark replied, his voice low but steady. The alien girl stirred. Her head shifted, her breath turning into a soft sigh. For a moment her eyes flickered open. They were unlike anything the humans had ever seen. Bright silver with rings of pale blue, like frozen stars. She blinked at them, confusion written on her face. Fear rushed into her gaze. Her hands twitched weakly, as though she wanted to push them away. Allen raised his hands slowly. "It's okay. We're not hurting you," he said, gently even though she could not understand. His tone was soft, careful, like speaking to a frightened child. The girl's lips moved. She whispered something in her language. Strange, sharp sounds carried on a weak breath. Her voice trembled, and then she closed her eyes again, too weak to hold them open. "She's awake," Davis whispered, his voice heavy with awe. "She actually woke up." Mark nodded. "She's holding on. That means we keep holding on too." Hours passed. The storm outside refused to rest. Snow piled higher against the ridge, sealing them in. The cold gnawed at their bones, yet they did not let go. At one point, Allen's body slumped, his strength nearly gone. Mark shook him, forcing him awake. "Not now, soldier," he barked. "You fall asleep. You freeze." Allen gritted his teeth, forcing himself to keep moving, keeping his body pressed against the girl's fragile frame. The alien girl trembled suddenly. A shiver ran through her whole body. Mark tightened his grip around her, afraid she was slipping away. But instead, her breath grew stronger. She coughed, a thin sound, but alive. Her hand lifted weakly, touching Mark's chest. Her fingers were cold as ice, but her touch was deliberate. Her eyes opened again, this time clearer. The silver blue light in them reflected the humans huddled around her. She stared at them with disbelief, as if she could not understand why strangers would give their lives for hers. Mark gave a small smile, though his lips were cracked and bleeding. "Stay with us," he said softly, even though he knew she could not understand. "We're not letting you go." The girl's eyes glistened with moisture, a fragile tear forming in the corner. She whispered again in her alien tongue. And though the words meant nothing to the humans, the tone was clear. It was a plea, a cry of survival. The others felt it too. They tightened their circle, pressing closer. Their hearts beat weak but determined. Outside, the storm thundered like a beast, but inside that frozen hollow, humanity's warmth was pushing back death itself. Hours blended into each other. The humans shared what little food they had, melted snow in their hands for water. They gave the alien girl small sips, guiding the liquid past her cracked lips. She swallowed slowly, struggling, but every drop gave her a little more strength. When she drifted into sleep, Alan whispered, "Why her, Captain? Why risk all of us for her?" Mark stared into the storm through the narrow crack in the ridge. His voice was calm. "Because she's alive. Because we can." Davis gave a weak laugh. "Only humans would think like that." Mark didn't argue. As the long hours passed, something else began to happen. The glow in her body spread faintly into the blankets around them. A strange warmth returned. Not strong, not enough to replace their sacrifice, but enough to remind them that she wasn't just taking. She was giving back. It was as if her body had learned from their heat and was now fighting to keep itself alive. The humans felt it. A tiny shift. A small hope. Mark whispered into the storm, more to himself than anyone else. "She's going to make it." The alien girl's breathing steadied, her chest rising stronger than before, and though the storm raged without mercy, the hollow held a fragile miracle. The day when humans gave their heat to a stranger and discovered that warmth could travel further than blood or language, and in that moment, even the freezing world could not silence the stubborn fire of humanity. The storm had finally begun to weaken, though its howls still echoed across the frozen plains. Inside the shallow hollow, the humans sat close together, their bodies shaking, their eyes heavy with exhaustion, but none of them moved away from the alien girl lying between them. Her skin still glowed faintly, like a candle struggling against the dark. Her breaths were stronger now, her chest rising and falling with more life than before. The warmth they had given her had kept her alive, but the question now was simple. What would happen when she truly woke? Captain Mark leaned against the icy wall, his eyes fixed on her face. The others shifted uneasily, their whispers soft. "She's not like us," Alan muttered, his lips cracked from cold. "What if she wakes up and sees us as enemies?" "She already does," Davis replied, staring at the strange silver-blue eyes that had opened briefly before. "You saw the fear in her face. She thinks we're dangerous." Mark remained quiet. His instincts told him that this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about something bigger, an unspoken test, one that went beyond their mission. The alien girl stirred. Her fingers twitched, her head turning slightly. Her eyelids fluttered open, revealing those star-like eyes again. This time, she stayed, awake longer. Her gaze darted between the humans surrounding her. She tried to push herself up, but her arms trembled and collapsed. Her lips moved, whispering strange words in her language. Her voice was soft but sharp, like crystal breaking under pressure. Alan slowly raised his hands, palms open. "It's okay. We're not here to hurt you," he said gently, even though he knew she didn't understand. His tone was calm, his movement slow, her breathing quickened. She pressed herself against the icy ground, fear flickering in her glowing eyes. Her hand clutched at the crystal pendant on her chest, as if it was her last shield, Mark noticed. He lowered his own weapon, setting it aside where she could see. His voice was steady but kind. "We saved you, not enemies, do you understand?" She blinked at him. Her lips trembled. She spoke again in broken words, but this time softer. Her voice was still laced with fear, but there was also confusion. Why were these strangers alive because of her? And why had they not left her to die? Davis slowly reached into his pack. He pulled out a ration bar, breaking it into small pieces. He held one out carefully. His movements were slow, deliberate, showing no threat. The alien girl stared at it. Her eyes narrowed. Her body trembled. She looked from the food to the human's tired face. Her instincts told her not to trust, but her body screamed with hunger. Finally, with shaking fingers, she reached out. Her cold hand brushed against Davis's. She snatched the piece of food and pulled it close. She sniffed it, uncertain. Then, placed it in her mouth. Her expression flickered from suspicion to surprise. She ate it, Davis whispered, astonished. The girl coughed, almost choking, but then she swallowed. Her body relaxed slightly, though her eyes never left them. Mark gave a small nod. Good. That's a start. Hours passed slowly. The humans gave her small sips of melted snow water. Each time she hesitated, but she took it. Each act of care was like a stone placed in the fragile bridge between fear and trust. At one point, Alan dozed off, his head slumping against the icy wall. The alien girl's gaze shifted to him. She studied the lines of exhaustion on his face, the way his arms had shielded her body through the night. She blinked, her fear softening just a little. When Alan stirred awake, she quickly looked away, clutching her crystal again. But something in her eyes had changed. Later, when Davis shivered violently, his body nearly giving out, the alien girl lifted her hand weakly. She placed it on his arm. Her touch was light, trembling, but it carried something unspoken, an acknowledgement, a sign that she no longer saw them only as threats. The humans froze at the gesture, staring in silence. She touched me, Davis whispered, disbelief in his voice. Mark gave a faint smile, though his lips were stiff with cold. It means she's starting to trust us. The alien girl's hand lingered for a moment, then pulled back. She curled against the blankets, her silver blue eyes closing. Her body still weak but no longer tense with fear. Mark leaned closer, lowering his voice. We need to show her who we are, not just with words, but with actions. The storm outside finally began to break. A pale light shone through the cracks in the ridge, revealing a world buried in endless snow. Their camp was half covered, their path home still uncertain, but in the hollow something far more important had begun. A fragile connection, born not from power or language, but from the simple act of giving life. The alien girl stirred in her sleep, whispering softly. In her tongue, her words were strange, but the tone was gentle, almost like a child calling for comfort. Mark sat back, exhaustion pulling at him, yet inside his chest, a small fire of hope burned. They had saved her, and now, perhaps, she would help save them. He looked at his team, then at the fragile alien girl resting between them. Fear is fading, Mark whispered. Trust will come next. And in that frozen silence, humanity's greatest strength was revealed. Not weapons, not power, but the courage to reach out. Even to those who feared them most, the storm had finally broken. For the first time in days, sunlight stretched across the frozen plains, glinting off mountains of snow and ice like endless shards of glass. Inside the hollow, the humans stirred, awake, their bodies stiff, their faces pale with exhaustion. They had survived the night. More importantly, the alien girl had survived with them. Her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the new light. The silver-blue glow within them seemed brighter now, more alive. She looked at the humans, no longer with a sharp panic of fear, but with the cautious gaze of someone unsure what came next. Captain Mark met her eyes and nodded once, calm and steady. You're alive because of us, he said softly, though he knew she couldn't understand. His tone mattered more than his words. The girl touched the crystal pendant around her neck, her fingers trembling as if it carried more weight than her frail body could hold. The humans had seen it glowing faintly when they gave her warmth, but none of them knew what it was. She spoke suddenly in her strange tongue, a series of sharp, melodic sounds that carried urgency. Davis frowned, shaking his head. I don't understand a word. Mark lifted his hand, pointing at the crystal. What is that? He asked slowly, repeating the gesture so she could see he meant the object. Her glowing eyes followed his movement. She held the crystal tightly against her chest, her lips pressing into a thin line. Her voice trembled as she spoke again, this time softer, almost like a confession. Alan leaned closer. I think she's telling us it's important, maybe more important than her own life. The girl noticed his attention. She reached into the snow beside her and began to draw with her trembling fingers. The lines were shaky but clear, a circle, then many smaller shapes surrounding it. She pressed the crystal against the drawing, making the snow shimmer faintly. Davis narrowed his eyes. That's not just a drawing. It's a map. Mark leaned closer, studying the snow. The circle looked like a world, maybe even this very frozen planet. The smaller shapes around it resembled ships. The girl pointed to one, then to herself, then to the sky. She came from one of those ships, Mark said slowly, piecing the meaning together. The girl nodded weakly, relief flickering across her face. For a moment it felt like real understanding had passed between them, but then her expression darkened. She drew another set of shapes, sharper, more jagged, like claws tearing into the first circle. Her voice grew tense, filled with pain as she spoke. She pointed to the claw-like shapes, then pressed her hand against the ground as if to show they had struck here. They attacked her people, Alan whispered, his throat tight. She's not stranded. She's a survivor. The girl's eyes glistened, a tear sliding down her silver skin. She pressed the crystal hard against her chest as though it was the last piece of her world. Mark's jaw clenched. She lost everything. For a long moment no one spoke. The frozen silence weighed heavily on them all. The girl had not just been buried beneath snow. She had been buried beneath loss. Suddenly a sharp howl echoed across the plains. The humans stiffened instantly, hands reaching for their weapons. It was not the storm this time. This was something alive. The alien girl's body tensed. Her eyes widened in fear. She pointed toward the sound and spoke a word again and again, her voice trembling. She knows that sound, Davis said, his grip tightening on his rifle. Mark's instincts screamed danger. He peered through the crack of the hollow. Shadows moved against the bright snow. Tall and jagged figures walking slowly across the ridge. They were not human. The girl pressed herself against the wall, clutching the crystal as if it could hide her. Her whisper was almost a sob. Alan swallowed hard. Those must be the ones who destroyed her people. Mark turned back to his team. Then they're looking for her. The humans exchanged grim looks. Their bodies were still weak from the storm, their supplies nearly gone, but now they understood. Saving the girl had not only kept her alive, it had drawn danger straight to them. The girl's eyes darted between them, fear and guilt mixing together. She touched her crystal again, then shook her head weakly as if to say, "Leave me, save yourselves." Mark knelt in front of her, his voice low but firm. "We don't abandon people. Not you. Not anyone." She couldn't understand his words, but she understood his tone. Her eyes widened in shock, then softened. The shadows outside grew closer, their shapes clearer. Weapons gleamed in the pale light. The storm had ended, but a new storm was walking toward them, one with claws and blood on its hands. Mark gripped his weapon, his breath steady despite the cold. He looked at his team, then at the fragile alien girl who had survived only because they had refused to let her die. "Get ready," he said quietly. "Whatever's coming, we face it together." The hollow seemed to shrink around them, the air thick with tension. The girl clutched her crystal, her glow pulsing faintly, as if preparing for something. The humans steadied their weapons, exhaustion pushed aside by the fire of survival. And outside, in the endless white snow, the enemy closed in. The silence outside the hollow broke with another howl, sharper this time. Closer. It was the kind of sound that cut straight into the chest, a sound that promised blood. The humans tensed, their frozen hands tightening around their weapons. Captain Mark leaned forward, peering through the narrow crack in the ridge. At first, only shifting shadows moved across the snow. But then the figures appeared. Tall, jagged, creatures with armor made of bone-like plates, their glowing eyes cutting through the storm's fading mist. "They've found us," Davis whispered, his voice low but heavy with dread. The alien girl whimpered softly, clutching the crystal to her chest. Her whole body shook as though every memory of terror had returned at once. She pressed herself into the icy wall of the hollow, whispering the same word again and again. Her name for the monsters. Alan swallowed hard. "Captain, we're not in fighting shape. We've barely got ammo, and we're half frozen already." Mark's jaw tightened, He looked back at the girl, at the tears frozen against her silver skin. Then he looked at his men. We don't get to choose the fight. It's already here. The shadows drew closer. One of the creatures sniffed the air, its breath steaming, like smoke. Then it let out a guttural roar, the sound echoing across the ice. They're hunting, Davis muttered, raising his rifle. Mark steadied his own weapon. Then let's remind them what happens when prey fights back. The first creature lunged toward the hollow. Snow sprayed as it crashed forward, claws slicing through the air. Davis fired, the shot cracking like thunder in the frozen silence. The round slammed into the beast's chest, making it stagger but not fall. Its screech rattled the walls of the hollow. The alien girl screamed, covering her ears. The crystal around her neck pulsed faintly, glowing brighter with every surge of fear. Mark fired next, his bullet punching into the creature's glowing eye. It collapsed with a violent hiss, clawing the snow in its death throes before falling still. But where one fell, more appeared. 3, then 4, moving with deadly precision. Their armor glinted like knives in the pale light. Alan cursed under his breath. There's too many. Mark's voice was calm, steady. Then we hold them here. The humans pressed their backs against the wall, using the narrow hollow as cover. The creatures slashed at the opening, their claws tearing chunks of ice and rock. The humans fired, their rifles bucking in their hands. Sparks and blood splattered the snow, but the beasts didn't stop. They pressed harder, their growls mixing with the humans' shouts. The alien girl's breathing quickened. She stared at the humans, at the way they fought without hesitation to protect her. Her fingers dug into the crystal, and suddenly, it began to glow brighter, so bright it lit the hollow in blue fire. Mark noticed, his eyes narrowing. What's it doing? The girl whispered something, her voice trembling but urgent. She pressed her hands against the crystal, and the glow spread through her body like veins of light. Her skin shimmered, and the humans felt a faint warmth radiating from her. Another creature lunged into the hollow, its claws slashing toward Alan. The alien girl cried out and thrust her hand forward. A flash of blue light burst from the crystal, slamming into the beast. It screeched and staggered back, smoke rising from its armored chest. Alan froze, staring at her in shock. She just saved me. The girl collapsed to her knees, her body trembling from the effort. The glow dimmed, her breath ragged. Mark steadied her with one arm. Easy. Don't burn yourself out. He looked at the others, his voice firm. She's with us, we fight together. The humans fired again, their rounds finding weak points in the creature's armor. Each shot echoed like thunder in the snow. The beasts shrieked, their bodies falling one by one. But for every enemy that fell, more shadows crept along the ridge. They won't stop, Davis muttered, sweat freezing on his brow. They want her too badly. Mark glanced at the girl. She was trembling, her eyes glowing faintly with silver fire. She looked back at him, then at the battlefield outside. Her lips parted, whispering a word. The humans didn't understand, but they understood the look in her eyes. She wasn't going to run anymore. The next wave of enemies surged forward. Claws tore through the snow, jaws opened wide. The humans raised their weapons again, and the alien girl stood weakly beside them, clutching her crystal as though it was her very heart. Alan grinned through his cracked lips. Guess it's us and her against the world now. Mark smirked, faintly. Then let's make the world remember. The hollow erupted in fire, light, and steel. Bullets cracked, claws slashed, the crystal blazed like a star. Snow turned red under the clash of survival. And in that frozen wasteland, in a fight none of them should have survived, something stronger than fear was born. The bond between humans and the alien girl who now fought at their side. The battlefield was a storm of chaos. Snow churned under heavy claws, bullets cracked through the freezing air, and the screams of dying beasts echoed across the ridge. The humans fought with everything they had left, their breath coming in ragged bursts, their bodies weakened by cold but refusing to give up. Captain Mark's rifle spat fire, each shot aimed with sharp precision. One beast fell, but another pushed, forward snarling, its bone-like armor glowing faintly in the pale light. Davis swung his weapon up and fired point blank, the recoil nearly throwing him back against the icy wall. The creature collapsed in the snow, screeching until silence swallowed it. The alien girl stood trembling between them, clutching her crystal so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The glow from it pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat, each beat stronger than before. Every time her fear surged, the crystal flared, sending faint waves of heat across the hollow. Alan staggered, dropping to one knee. His face was pale, his lips blue from exhaustion. "Captain, ammo's running low," he gasped, his rifle clicking empty. Mark glanced at him, then at the others. He could see the truth. They were at their limit. Their warmth had saved the girl, but it had drained them. Their bodies were running on stubborn will alone. The girl noticed. Her glowing eyes widened as she looked at the shivering men, at the way their hands shook even as they kept fighting for her. Tears welled in her silver eyes. She whispered something in her language, her voice soft but filled with urgency, and then pressed both palms against the crystal. Light erupted. The hollow lit up in a blue blaze, the snow reflecting the glow like mirrors. Heat rolled off her body, warm and alive, spreading into the humans like fire returning to cold embers. Mark gasped as strength surged back into his limbs, the chill in his bones retreating. Davis's shivers slowed, his breath steadying. Even Alan lifted his head, his eyes wide with shock. "She's giving it back," Davis whispered in awe. "Our heat. She's returning it." The beasts outside roared, enraged by the glow. They lunged together, claws slashing, jaws snapping. The humans raised their weapons again, their strength renewed. But this time, they weren't fighting alone. The alien girl stepped forward. Her fragile body shook, but her eyes blazed with silver fire. She lifted the crystal high, and a wave of blue light burst outward, striking the first beast. The creature screeched as its armor cracked, glowing lines burning across its chest. It stumbled back, smoke rising from its wounds. The human seized the chance. Mark fired, his bullet finding the weak point. The beast collapsed, silence following its fall. Another came, snarling. Davis swung his rifle like a club, slamming it into the beast's jaw. The girl cried out, the crystal pulsing again. Heat flared across Davis's arms, giving him strength beyond his failing body. With one last push, he drove the beast into the ground. Alan laughed weakly, his breath steaming. "We're fighting with her now," he said, his voice cracking. The battle raged on. The beasts pressed harder, but each time they came close, the girl's crystal flared, her body glowing brighter, her warmth pushing into the humans. Together, they struck back, bullets and light mixing in a storm of survival. At last, only one beast remained. It was larger than the rest, its armor jagged, its eyes glowing with savage hunger. It stepped into the hollow, claws scraping against the ice. The air grew heavy with its roar. Mark steadied his weapon, but the girl stepped in front of him. Her silver blue eyes shone, unafraid now. She pressed the crystal against her chest, whispering words in her language, and the glow spread across her whole body until she was a living flame of light. The beast lunged. She raised her hand. A blinding wave burst out, slamming into the creature with the force of a storm. The ground shook, ice cracking under the impact. The beast screeched, its armor shattering until it collapsed. Into the snow, smoke rising from its body. Silence followed. The humans lowered their weapons slowly, their breaths ragged. The girl fell to her knees, her glow dimming. Mark rushed to her side, catching her before she collapsed. Her body was weak, trembling but alive. Her eyes fluttered open, meeting his. For the first time, there was no fear in them, only trust. She whispered softly, a word the humans couldn't understand, but the meaning was clear. Gratitude. Mark nodded, his voice firm, but gentle. "You're safe now." The others gathered around, their exhaustion heavy, but their spirits alive. They had survived the storm, the cold, and now the beasts. And none of it would have been possible without the girl they had refused to abandon. Outside, the frozen world stretched endlessly, but inside that hollow, warmth lingered, born not only from their bodies but from a bond that had turned strangers into something more. The girl closed her eyes, resting against Mark's chest. The crystal pulsed faintly, as if alive with their shared fire. The humans sat together, battered but unbroken, their hearts beating with the stubborn truth that even in the coldest of worlds, humanity's heat could not be extinguished. The battlefield lay silent. The snow outside was stained with dark trails where the beasts had fallen, their twisted bodies frozen in the cold. The storm had passed, the howling winds replaced by an eerie calm. Inside the hollow, the humans sat together, their breaths heavy, but steady. They had survived. Captain Mark held the alien girl in his arms. Her body was weak, trembling with exhaustion, yet the faint glow of the crystal still pulsed gently against her chest. She opened her eyes slowly, silver blue light shining through them, and looked at the humans gathered around her. For the first time, there was no fear in her gaze, only something softer, something that looked very much like hope. Alan broke the silence first. His voice was hoarse, but there was a smile hidden in it. "Well, Captain, guess we're still here." Davis gave a tired laugh. "Barely. If she hadn't stepped in, we'd be lying out there with the beasts." The alien girl stirred, trying to sit up. Mark helped her carefully, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. She touched the crystal, then looked at the men, her lips trembling, as she whispered in her language. None of them understood the words, but the way she pressed her hand against her heart, and then toward them, made the meaning clear. Gratitude. Mark nodded slowly. "You don't need words, we know." The girl's eyes shimmered. A single tear rolled down her silver cheek, catching the faint light. She reached out with a shaking hand, placing it against Mark's chest. The crystal pulsed brighter, as if echoing her gesture. For a brief moment, warmth spread through him again. Not just heat, but a deep, living connection that words could never explain. Alan's eyes widened. Did she just bond with you?" Davis frowned. "Bond?" Alan nodded. "You felt it too, didn't you? The way the heat spread, like she tied herself to him." Mark said nothing, but he felt it. A link, fragile but undeniable, had formed in that moment. It wasn't just survival anymore. Something greater had been forged between them. The girl looked at each of them, her gaze steady despite her weakness. She spoke again, slowly, carefully, as if searching for sounds they might understand. One word came clearer than the rest. Together. The humans froze. The accent was heavy, broken, but the meaning was unmistakable. She had spoken in their tongue. Alan's mouth fell open. She learned that from us?" Davis grinned faintly. "Guess we made an impression." Mark felt a quiet pride stir inside him. Against the cold, against the beasts, against death itself, they had not just saved her life. They had given her a reason to fight, a reason to trust, and she had given them something back. Her bond. Hours passed as the group recovered. They patched wounds, shared what little food remained, and watched the horizon carefully for more danger. The girl stayed close to them, no longer pressing herself against the wall in fear. Instead, she leaned near, her glowing eyes watching with quiet trust. When night came, the humans prepared for the freezing cold again. But this time, they were not the only source of warmth. The girl pressed herself between them, her crystal glowing faintly, sending a steady heat into the circle. The men exchanged astonished looks. Davis chuckled softly. "Seems like she's keeping us alive now." Mark smiled faintly, his eyes never leaving the glow. "We gave her warmth. She's returning it." Sleep came easier that night, not because the cold had vanished, but because the fear had. The next morning, a low hum cut across the icy plains. Mark was the first to hear it. He stood, scanning the horizon. Far in the distance, against the pale sky, lights glimmered. A ship. Alan staggered to his feet, his voice breaking with relief. "Rescue team. They found us." The girl looked up at the sky too, Her silver eyes widened in awe at the sight of the vessel descending through the clouds. But when she turned, back to the humans, fear flickered across her face, not of the ship but of leaving them. She shook her head weakly, clutching the crystal to her chest. She whispered a string of words in her tongue, her voice desperate. Then she said one word in theirs again. Together. Mark knelt in front of her, his hand steady on her shoulder. Together, he repeated. Her fear melted into relief. Her shoulders trembling as she nodded. The ship landed on the ridge, engines kicking snow into the air. Human figures spilled out, waving, calling for the survivors. Mark's men staggered forward, their hearts heavy with exhaustion, but lifted with hope. The alien girl followed, her steps unsteady but determined. When the rescuers saw her, confusion spread through their faces. Whispers rose immediately. What is she? An alien? Where did she come from? Mark's voice cut through them all, firm and unyielding. She's with us. The rescuers hesitated, but they saw the way the girl clung to him, the way his men stood protectively around her. They said no more. As the humans boarded the ship, the alien girl stayed close, her crystal glowing faintly. She had been buried beneath the snow, abandoned to die. But the humans had given her their warmth, their trust, their lives. And in return, she had given them her bond. As the ship rose into the sky, carrying them away from the frozen wasteland, Mark looked at her one last time. Her silver blue eyes met his, glowing with a quiet fire. In that look, a promise was made, of survival, of unity, of something far greater than chance. And thus, in the coldest world, beneath endless snow, a bond was forged between humanity and an alien girl. A bond not of blood or language, but of warmth shared when the universe itself had tried to freeze them apart.